Now you also notice, I mean, how do you interpret these stripes going down in it?
The machine,
A machine, yeah, probably, yes. Back, most likely when they were actually trying to build this aqueduct, they had to blast it out. But I kept watching the progress as they were doing the construction on Route 9. They were blasting through pudding stone to try and get here. And so they would have had to either drill boreholes for the dynamite, or you might see things like that from core sampling. Sometimes you'll see it in big rocks, like if you go to breakwaters on the shore, you'll see holes in rocks that have been drilled into the holes. But in those cases, oftentimes, they've been drilled in just so the machinery can grab the rock and move it. So that's clearly, you can see those kind of things you can pretty well tell are man-made. But that to me is also a testament to the perseverance and the, how nature resists and how things can, the struggle to survive. The other thing that the tree is nice for is it is a nice marker for seeing this thing right here, which you don't necessarily pick out. Now again, this is very similar to the things we saw over at Hemlock Gorge. Is this likely a natural or a man-made?
Probably a drill.
Probably a drill. Now sometimes, I'll ask kids well, how might this have gotten here? And sometimes kids will say, water! It's like, okay, that's great that you're learning that water can carry stuff away, but is water likely to make something this perfectly round and this straight? And the answer is no. And this, again, could either have been part of that blasting, or as I mentioned, sometimes they'll drill holes like this so they can grip the rock and move the pieces around. This, you'll notice, is a lot of this pink rock. This is our pink granite that you see popping up all over the place. The Earth's surface, the crust of the Earth is very close to the surface around here. And as you drive around town, you'll see places where you see ledge sticking out. Well, that is actually the crust of the Earth, and there's just no soil on top of it. Anywhere you go on the planet, dig down through the sand or the dirt or whatever you've got, eventually you're going to hit solid bedrock. And here in Wellesley, the soil level is actually very thin, and a lot of that bedrock is right at the surface. Even when kids used to slide on a geology, they never do it. You never do it if it was wet. What evidence do you see? I mean, one of the big questions that appears on every page, what evidence is there of weathering, erosion, or deposition? So you're now channeling your inner fourth grader. What might you say in terms of what you see here that would represent weathering, erosion, or deposition?
Tree growing out.
The tree growing out. Now in this case, unlike that tree back there, this is a tree growing out of the top of the rock. So over time, soil had built up, a seed planted itself, and it's somehow making, it was able to take root enough to be on the top of this rock and grow here. So yeah, that's going to keep working on this rock and break it apart. What else do you see acting on this rock?
Botanical as well.
Yeah, all the lichen,
Biological.
the biologicals going on there. Yep. Anything else you're noticing? Anything we can infer about things that have happened in the past at this rock? Over time. Well, what smoothed it in the first place? The glacier. We can infer that, we can look at the evidence with the scratch marks in it and the smoothing that a glacier came, and because it's smooth on this side and broken on that side, we can tell the glaciers came from this direction and traveled that way. If you think about those rocks down at the bottom, you could make an argument for deposition because they've broken off and gotten deposited elsewhere. So again, with the students, if they can make a claim and back it up with some form of reasoning, that's what we're after. A strategy we like to use in classrooms is think, pair, share. Give kids a chance to think for themselves first, then turn and talk to someone next to them, and then share with the whole group. And one of the things that strategy does, if you think about you or the people around you, there are those people who, when they're thinking through something, need quiet, and they need to quietly think it through. Their internal processors. Then you have those people, and if you're an internal processor, you're made nuts by the person who has to talk things through in order to understand them. That's an external processor. So when you do something like a think, pair, share, You're giving the internal processors the chance to think, to gather their thoughts together. When they're pairing up with somebody else, they get to hear someone else's idea, but you also get those students who are external processors, you give them an opportunity to kind of solidify their thinking. And then when you share as a whole group, you're going to have a richer discussion. So that's another strategy you could try in that case.
And will the teachers tell us like how much time to spend approximately each site and all that? Like,
I would talk to them. I mean, I think students will tend to do these sites faster than we do. In part because, we're waiting for the cars to, in this training we have to wait for all the cars to gather. And I'm actually sharing with you background information that you won't necessarily have to be sharing with students, but I just think it's nice if you have that. Because things like the ice dam that we saw over at Hemlock Gorge, that can be a fun fact to tell the kids. So I like to give you those kinds of things. Chances are likely the students will spend less time at the sites than we've been spending, but I would estimate probably about 10-15 minutes. Definitely ask the teacher, especially depending upon your start time, end time, if there's a hard stop because of a dismissal or whatever it might be. Also talk to the teacher about how she wants to handle snack time. I'm assuming the kids will have a snack some point along the way, and it may be that you just stop and before they get out of the car, at some point they just get them out of the car if you don't want the juice box in your car, and just have them decide and eat their snack or whatever. But again, try not to discourage drinking copious amounts of liquid. All right, and just one other thing while we're up here, to notice, which I think is kind of interesting, is that as you look around, you'll see a lot of places where it looks like the lichen is really gravitating to the cracks. And those are just that's only going to keep working to make those cracks bigger and bigger and bigger.
Eventually, everything will be flat.
Eventually, everything will be flat, but by then we'll have another earthquake or a volcano or something, and it'll all come up again. But that, and that's very true. That's the truth of it. Is that it's a dynamic planet that we're on. All right. This is great because you can actually see all those grooves. So again, this part would have been, on the part that was smoothed by the glacier, but you get all those scratch marks and all those grooves in it. And then if you look over here, you can even see where, this crack is getting bigger and bigger. It's going to keep getting bigger over time. And eventually, I would anticipate even this block is going to break off from this block. So it's constantly changing, even if the change are happening at a glacial pace. And now you'll notice also that, there is kind of a shiny patch down the thing. And that, I imagine, it has been polished. It has been a man-made polish by many people sliding. When we did this trip in the past, students used to slide down this as part of the trip. They were permitted to slide down. Some teachers let them, some teachers did not. Now, full disclosure, when I was a fourth grade teacher, I let my students slide, and perhaps it was when I adopted this position, which is more of an administrative position of like, heck no. You'll hear, when I talk about this trip, I talk about the geology field investigation. I do not call this a field trip, and I very intentionally don't call it a field trip. This is, right now, you are a geologist. You've been working in the lab, in the classroom, and now you're going to go out into the field and investigate it in the real world. The moment you start having kids, what would happen with the sliding is that all you'd get was kids saying, can we slide now? Can we go now? Can we slide now? And they weren't paying attention to the site. This is not recess, this is school. This is a serious field investigation, and we are geologists working in the field. So for all those reasons, we don't slide anymore. We do go to the top to take a look at what's going on up there. If it's a day like today where it's so wet and potentially slippery, decide for yourself whether you feel it's safe to have a group of 10-year-olds up there. If you decide that the conditions are such that maybe they shouldn't go up there, that's fine. You don't need to take them to the top. I will bring you up there today because I want you to see what's up there to see, and so just to show you how to get there. But again, do not feel like you have to bring them up there. If you're feeling unsure about it in any way, they don't need to go up. But the really important thing is what we can get to see from down here. Now, these rock pieces that are here, weren't necessarily plucked off by the glacier. This could well be evidence of the weathering that's happened since that time. For any of you who, if you grew up in this area, up in New Hampshire, their state symbol is the old man in the mountain. Because you could see the profile of a man in the mountain. He does not exist anymore because his nose fell off. And that is that process, that natural process of weathering. As rock gets older, it starts to break apart. So while these rocks may not have been plucked off by the glacier, it's a very strong visual image for what could happen during a glacier with the rock pieces getting broken off.